Hello and welcome back to Where Are All My Friends? Every now and then, I have a conversation where I expect that it's going to be good, but then it's like a billion times better than I could have even imagined. And this is absolutely one of those. It is with Misha Mansoor of Periphery, and we talked about everything. We talked about his early days and how excited he was to just be able to follow his dream and his passion of music and everything that led to. But within this conversation, he shared so many great pieces of advice, really all along the path of follow your passion, align with the right people, keep things simple, and all the rest will pay off. But hearing his story and hearing how that worked out for him and everything that he shared just made it hit so different. So I'm literally blown away by this. I'm going to keep rambling if I don't just get into the episode. My one other note that I say all the time is if you do like this episode, if you're just now finding it, or if you're a longtime subscriber, if you haven't already, share the episode with a friend that you think would like it. Subscribe wherever you listen. All that stuff helps me grow this podcast and talk to people like Misha that much more. So it would mean a ton to me if you do that. And there I will leave it. Enjoy the episode. Misha Mansoor, where are all my friends? This is...
How'd I look?
This is what I get for doing the podcast on...
Yeah, this is your punishment. And I am, for the record, gonna stay like this. So if you're watching this and you can't stand this visage, then you're gonna have a bad time. Might as well just stop watching right now. I tuned into
the Where Are All My Friends podcast, and I couldn't accurately see Misha, and now I don't like it. Thumbs down.
You can a bit more accurately see me there. If you're wondering what I look like most of the time.
Man, if you're listening to this,
those are my real eyes.
Yeah, of course.
Wanted to look a little cooler today, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it, dude. Like sometimes you got to come in and razzle dazzle the pod. So,
this is definitely razzle dazzling.
This is the razzle dazzle. I feel good about.
You're getting special treatment.
This is nice. To explain briefly, I'm excited to do this podcast because honestly, I really didn't know you at all before this, and I'm surprised because we both have been around music for a huge amount of our lives and our careers. We're both really big car nerds and fans, and it seems like we have a couple mutual friends in crossover. So episodes like this are always really fun for me because I'm like, damn, I'm surprised we hadn't been friends before, but this is dope getting to know you and learn all these things. So thanks for taking the time to do it.
Of course.
So as far as your band story, as far as Periphery goes, I feel like you've good and told that story pretty well. So I kind of want to talk about like everything that you're doing past that. But for a listener who doesn't know who you are, just very briefly who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, I'm a space pirate, and there are these things called bounties. And I'm in a band called Periphery. I started it in a bedroom in 2005. It was sort of at the advent of like finding members on social media and the internet and forums and things like that, which did well for us. And I still make music in a bedroom. And that's basically the whole story. We've been able to go on tour and tour the world, and it's been fun. But it's always just been about having fun, really, just having fun with it.
Yeah. You started music in a bedroom, and you continue to make music in a bedroom, except every now and then you travel the world when there isn't a pandemic.
Right. Yeah, the pandemic has kind of brought it back to 2005 levels of touring, but. Yeah, it's something that I feel very fortunate to do. It's definitely, a dream that a lot of people chase, and that the odds are definitely against you. And I attribute so much of why we are where we are to just luck, unfortunately.
Really?
That's oh yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Because.
Yeah.
Well, that's so interesting to me because I think a lot of times you'll hear a successful person kind of play to some amount of luck. However, the thing that I was looking at and thinking about right before we started recording is like just the incredible amount of volume of music that you've put out. You've put out so much music.
Yeah, but it's a passion play, like at the end of the day, the music's always just been something that I enjoy doing. And I don't even think I'm that good at it, but I enjoy it. And the example I always give is like I play a lot of video games too, I don't think I'm very good at video games, but I still enjoy it. It's very much the same thing. So it's just something I really enjoy doing. Um, and I enjoyed sharing it because I was actually nervous to share it at first because I thought everyone would hate it, but then people didn't hate it, and that sort of created a little feedback loop of like, oh, well, I should keep sharing it. So I'd post it up online on forums and whatever that I happened to be posting on anyways. One thing led to another, and then it was like, oh, there may be viability for a band here. But yeah, it's a lot of it is right place, right time. I always say if I had to start a band again, I probably wouldn't, because I
Really?
recognize how much of it is down to luck. And I have so many friends who are insanely talented, much more talented than me, who just didn't have the opportunities or whatever. I think one of the biggest scams in this industry, a lot of people try to sell you is like, you just have to want it. It's like everybody wants it,
Wow.
wanting
Yeah.
it, working hard, like being driven, all those things. People want those to be the separators, but they're not. Those are the things that get your foot in the door. And then beyond that, I'll say there's two things. One is having luck, but two is also not squandering it. So
Yo,
having
yeah.
having a mindset, situation, group of people, advisors, whatever it is, or innate ability to figure stuff out, whatever it is, to help you maximize these opportunities, so that when you are lucky, you are making the most of them. I'd say we've been fortunate with that as well, but we haven't even gotten that right every time. Of course, it's a learning process.
Well, that's actually a really, really interesting topic to talk about because it's like, okay, cool. So you say that you attribute it to luck and you're just stoked that it worked out, etc. But then I do think that there's plenty of people that have been given that chance of luck or the right place, right time moment. The spotlight's been on them and then they do squander it.
Yeah,
So at what, like, where did you kind of get the self-awareness or the skills or whatever that was to understand, like, okay, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how people are paying attention. I don't think I'm the best, but people are, and it's catching. So now I have to continue to make sure that it goes and to continue to build that. Like, where did that come from? How did you
I
figure
don't
that
think
out?
that I don't think that was ever the mindset though.
Oh,
Like the mindset was just like, I like making music. My dream is to play live. I remember thinking like, if we could just get a band and like do a tour in a van, just to not lose too much money, that would be the dream, like to just get in the van. Like that was such a romantic idea, and it's like sleeping on people's couches, sleeping on floors, just really slumming it. Like that was the dream. And that was like also like an attainable dream, it was never like, oh, I want to play like arenas. I mean, of course, everybody in the back of their
yeah,
their
yeah.
their mind wants that, and we still don't play arenas, but it's like, but that was never really like, it was more the sort of like intimate side of it that was a bit more like the sort of more DIY, like punk rock. Not that we're punk at all, but like just that kind of vibe where it was like, that's all I was aiming for. And everything else has been icing on the cake, really. So it was just more like, okay, well, we've gotten this far. Like, how far can we push this crazy thing? This doesn't make sense. And also, when I first started the project, it was very hard to find members, and our music was not cool. Like the first few tours we did, people did not like us. Like we
Really?
were no, not at all. I remember just being stoked if like, we saw a couple people kind of vibing out, because like people were just waiting for us to stop.
What
And then
kind
the
of
first
tours were
time,
you on? Like, who were you opening for?
well, the first like sort of real big tour that we did was the Thrash and Burn tour. It was like the summer festival tour, so there was like 10 bands. I think Devil Driver was headlining, but Muir was direct support, and they were drawing the entire crowd.
Okay.
And we were actually somehow not even just opening, we were like second. But
Oh,
yeah, people were just waiting for our set to be over. Um
damn.
and but I remember there were some, there might have been the odd show where like there was like a little mosh pit at some point, and like that made my life. You know, like that was a big enough deal. If like at some point some people were kind of vibing or getting into it, like that was amazing. But I was just stoked to be playing live. So everything from there was just kind of like, well, where can we go with this? You know, like that's not so
Damn, it was
bad.
all bonus round from there. Like as soon as you were
Yeah,
on
yeah,
stage, you're
yeah.
like, damn guys, we did it.
Yeah, that was the goal. That was because that was like kind of a realistic goal. Like all the other pipe dream things, it's like it's great, but it's like you don't. It's fun to dream about stuff. Like I like
Yeah.
to dream about stuff, but I also dream about stuff recognizing that kind of what makes it fun is the fact that it'll probably never happen. So like from that perspective, it was all bonus round because this was like achieving the thing that in my head I was like, this would be a dream. And I think it's realistic if we put in this kind of work and we're kind of smart about it.
Right. And also, didn't you have a background where like a whole lot of your family and your upbringing was like go to school, go to college? So even just getting away from that and trying that was like a huge win for you to get that.
Yeah, my dad's an example of someone who like just studied in school, worked hard, got a job, bought a house, had a family, the traditional model of like the parent in the nuclear family. And like as far back as I could remember, I'm first generation American, and like I found this out after the fact, but like there tends to be a very strong push on education, like that,
Yeah.
above all, education's the most important thing. So with my parents, it was always, and I was pretty bad at school, like I wasn't getting good grades or anything like that. And they wanted me to get good grades so bad. They always tried, we weren't really allowed to like watch much TV or like I never had like video games or consoles, and there was always like a deal like, oh, if you make the honor roll, we'll get you a PlayStation or something like that. But I
Wow.
never made the honor roll, so like I never had a PlayStation or a Nintendo or
Damn.
anything like that. Yeah, they I mean, I get it. Like I get why they wanted, like education is very important. And then
Totally.
I
Especially
finally
if they
made
didn't
it.
have the chance, right? Like if you're first generation American, like you don't know like the luxury to get an education like that. Like they just want the best for you. Like they don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And they like, for example, like they moved into, like we got a house in Bethesda, Maryland that my parents couldn't afford.
Oh,
We had to have like lodgers, or like they were like renting a room out to like and like I remember like growing up, and it was like I remember thinking that if you went to the grocery store and you didn't shop with coupons, you're a millionaire. Like that's, or if you weren't buying, if you were
yeah.
buying stuff. I remember like thinking like buying like non-store brand stuff, like name brand stuff was crazy.
Yeah,
Like
you
why
go to a
would you do
friend's
that?
house and they have like the name brand cereal. You're just
My
like,
dad was always,
yo,
my dad's like, why should we pay double the price? It's the same thing. It's like, and like it's still in the back of my head today, when I
yeah,
go
yeah,
shopping,
yeah.
I still get the guilt over it. But like I remember thinking all that stuff, but like it was because the zip code that we moved into, it wasn't like a crazy nice house or anything. It was just the zip code that we were in put us in a very good school system.
Oh,
Good public
yeah.
schools for like especially like the middle school and high school were
Right. And
very
that's a
highly
real thing.
regarded.
Like you can
Yeah.
overextend yourself for your housing situation if you know that that gets your kids into great schools. You'll do whatever
And
you got to
that's
do.
that's that's what, and there were some people I know that like, I'm not going to name names, and I don't have a problem with this. I'm happy they did it, but like who weren't in that district, but like basically like use some loopholes to get their kids into that school system. So it was a
Yeah.
very desirable school system, and my parents basically, they basically were very house poor just
Yeah.
to get us into this good school system. So that's how
Yeah.
important education was to them. And as far back as I can remember, it was always like, yeah, you want to go to school. It would be like, why do I have to go to school today? Well, because you have to get good grades, and then you get into a good college, and then you get a good job, and you can buy a house, have a family, whatever. So like
Right.
as
Like,
far back as I can remember, that was just the way. And an interesting thing happens like when you turn 18, all of a sudden, or well, for me it was like 17, 18, whatever, but all of a sudden you don't have to do anything.
right.
Like
Yeah.
you, like once you're out of high school, like it's a very interesting transition, because like you go from like it is illegal for you not to go to school to like now you don't have to do anything. Just one day.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Yeah, no, that's
You
such
could
a
go to
weird way
college.
to put it, but you're right. Like it really is. Like you spend your entire life growing up having to do something, and then all of a sudden a day on a calendar strikes and you can do literally anything.
Anything. Anything. And it's like there's no transition, there's no preparation. And if anything, you know, this is maybe me getting a bit cynical here, but like I think the whole like university thing, I'm not gonna say it's a scam overall, but just they definitely scam. What I'll explain what I mean. Like, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and they're like, "That's fine, you can figure it out." Like, but like to not go to college, like in my school system, was considered like, "Oh, you're gonna be homeless." Like, "Oh,
Yeah,
you want to be one of the poors," I guess. You know, it's like,
totally.
and it was just you would be look like, "Oh, you know, that guy didn't get into college." You know, like that's this horrible thing. In
Yeah.
hindsight, I really wish someone had encouraged me to just get a job for a year. Like, it's like, "Oh, you don't know what you want to do? Go work. Go
Yeah.
work. Like literally anything. Doesn't matter what. Go make minimum wage for a year."
And I
They'll
think to
give you
paint
some
that
perspective.
picture, yeah, to paint
Yeah.
that picture a little bit more, like now I think like this next generation that's graduating high school, like parents can kind of see like you can make very real money doing things on the internet. There's all these non-traditional things. Like I think it's a little less of like a mandatory thing and people are talking about it more. But like you came from, how old are you now?
So I'm what am I, 36? Jeez, I'm
Okay,
old.
yeah. And then I'm
Getting
30.
there.
So like I would say my generation, like right at 30 is just the beginning of when that was like I was still kind of looked at as like a black sheep when I dropped out of college or when I didn't do college. So like you were even
Yeah.
ahead of me where it was just different. Like it wasn't the
But
same.
it's
You
also this
couldn't-
bubble. There was also this bubble around this school system and like where I grew up that
Oh, so even
compounded the
more.
effect. Yeah, it compounded
Yeah,
the
yeah.
effect because it was like, you know, and I feel like schools would take advantage of this to some degree because you know they don't care if you don't. It's almost better for them if you don't know what you want to do. It's another year of tuition that you just
Right.
waste. You know.
Yeah.
So for them as a business, it's of course you're trusting them this whole time. You're like, oh, the school system, it's their job to teach me, and now they're saying, yeah, go to college. So it's like, oh, I guess I have to go to college. But really, I didn't have to go to college, and I shouldn't because I didn't have a job or I didn't have a path I knew what I wanted to do. Like if you're like, oh,
Right.
I want to be a doctor, I want to be this, or I want to be any sort of job where you need a degree, then go to college, go get it that done. That's great, you know. And then it's not a scam. Take it seriously, get your degree. But
And
like if you
especially
don't know,
because
you're
if you work that year, sorry to cut you off, like I think we're probably about to say the same thing, but like if you go and work that year without college, you understand like, oh, I have that like finesse and that grind where I can figure out how to do this without it. Or, oh, this sucks being the general manager of a thing and I want to go get a formal education so I can skip all these steps. Like you understand why and you understand what you're going for.
it'll give you perspective at the very
Yes.
least, you know. And I think also working a shitty job is kind of important. It's character building for once. And like you never have that experience. Like you know, I worked summers to like pay off gear that I wanted to buy, you know. But like, and that sucked. But it sucks in a different way to like the grind because there's an end in sight, you know. Like the
Yeah.
grind is a little different, you know. And it's just like you. It's just important perspective, I think, because you never really have to do something like that. Even as much as a grind as school can be, there's these other aspects to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it always feels like you're working towards something. Whereas just working a job, like just working whatever job, and you know, if you're just out of high school, you're not really going to have like a ton of great opportunities.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think that gives you a lot of perspective. Whether it helps you figure out what you want to do, it may help you figure out what you definitely don't want to do, and that can be a great motivator. If you're
Dude,
like, well,
yeah.
if these are the options that are available to me, like I'm not okay with this. So what do I need to do now? Now maybe college is you know, like yeah, like this path may have seemed like a lot of work, but it's a lot less work than just working this with no real end in sight, you know. Or what am I gonna do? Become the manager of the store? Like, is that really what I want to do? Or maybe it is. Maybe you're like, hey, I like where I work, and this grind is actually real, and I could become manager, district manager. Like that's a path, and that's a real path, and you can make money, and like you know. But these are all perspectives that like in this bubble, like I wasn't gonna get. So I
Right.
ended up going to college
Oh, you did?
and wasting two years there,
Well,
and
because I
then
was
eventually, yeah,
I was going to say, like, you've done a great job painting the picture of what it must have been like to grow up in your life and to make that jump of, I'm not going to do the formal thing. I'm not going to do the college thing. And I'm about to just go play music or make music in my bedroom. Like, that came from a very different place. And that was quite the jump, it feels like, for you. And I get it even more so to be like, yeah, dude, the fact that we were in a van playing shows, like that hits different when you've already accomplished your breaking off from the path. And you probably have this like huge wave of appreciation just for that.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I guess long story long on all of this, but the way it happened, I went to college not knowing what I want to do, not really finding out what I want to do there, and I was skipping class the whole time, just recording. Like, it was around the time where I figured out on my gaming computer I could start recording,
Yeah.
and there was software that was facilitating that, and then all of a sudden I could make music by myself without bothering anyone. That's just what I did all day, like every day. And I went to University of Toronto, which gets very cold, so I didn't even want to go outside. So I just stayed in making music. And eventually, after a couple of years, and this is the other thing, is I talked to a lot of people. This is the sort of myth that got sold, and maybe at one point was true. Maybe it was just transitioning around our generation, and it's probably less true now, or sorry, even more true now. Is this degree and the value of it has really gone down. Like, there used to be a point in time where it would guarantee you something, but now I was talking to people, I'd be eating out at a restaurant somewhere, and I'd be talking to the server, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I have a master's in English." I'm like, "What are you doing serving here?" They're like, "Well, I wanted to be a journalist." I'm like, "But you have a master's." Like, and he's like, "Yeah, well, it's hard to find a job. I really wish they had, taught me to network more." And I'm like, "Wow, that's interesting." So then I started to realize that, like, no matter what you're in, it's going to be a hustle. So, like, I had a conversation with my parents because I had a breakdown. I was like, I don't even like what I'm doing, and I'm against people. It's a competitive field. Everything's a competitive field, and I'm up against people who really, really love it. They love this as much as I love music. So shouldn't I be, if I'm going to be up against a hustle anyways, shouldn't I be doing the thing that I actually genuinely care about? And, they agreed with that. They reluctantly, they hated it. They were like, the odds are like terrible. My dad's very logical, and he logically broke down like why I should prepare myself for disappointment.
Wow.
And I was like, look, like, you're right. But if I don't try, I don't think I could live with myself, like, and he was like, well, this isn't an excuse to be lazy. Like, if you think you're just going to come home and like stay at home and like just be lazy, like playing video games all day or making music all day, like, you're wrong. That's not what we're doing here. So, like, here's the deal. You come home, you get a full-time job. If you get a full-time job, we'll rent you a room in our house for cheap for Bethesda. He's like, you won't find a better deal. We're Jewish, so he's gotta get a cut off.
He's breaking down the numbers.
He's an economist. He's an economist. He's like, you're gonna be paying rent, but like, if you get a full-time job, you'll be getting the best rate in Bethesda that you could get.
I very deeply relate to a lot of what you're saying. So
yeah,
yes,
but it was good. It was good because he was like, I want you to work, and then he's like, in your free time, you could do whatever you want, and if that's music, then it's music. And I'll tell you, like, I went from being miserable to probably like the happiest I've been in a while. Like, because, even working my job, I at least felt like I was working towards something in my downtime. And I just swore off of everything else. In my downtime, I was just working on music,
That's cool.
And people are like, oh, like, so you have to make a sacrifice. I'll tell you, it did not feel like a sacrifice to me. It felt like the way, like, this was like, oh, finally I'm doing something that feels right. I think like what it was in college, I was just like, this feels wrong. This does not feel like the way to happiness or fulfillment or anything. It feels like I'm just treading water.
Yeah.
And the thing I want to do is just getting sort of pushed to the side. And then for the first time ever, even though like I was only able to dedicate a certain amount of time a day to music, it still felt like that was what I was really working on.
Dude,
and
that
the work
kind of explains it. Like that explains why you're just stoked on whatever level. You're like, dude, I did it. As soon as I was able to just make music, like, I did it.
Well, yeah, because I was like, I was even there, and I probably wouldn't feel the same way if I was still at that level now. But like there, I was like, man, like, if I can just work and just do music in my free time, that's a way better deal. Like, that's fine. Like, and yeah, I was living in my parents' basement, but like, I didn't care, I was happy. It meant I had low expenses. I was able to walk to work, so I didn't need a car or anything like that. Like, I had very low expenses. My mom would cook, which was great,
Yeah.
And my
rent really got a good deal on that.
My rent was dirt cheap, so that was my only real expense. Yeah, like, and I just saved up all my money and spent it all on gear.
That's amazing. Okay, so 2 questions there. One, you said you didn't have a car. When did your car hobby, when did your love for cars kick in? Like, at that point, were you like wishing that you were pushing some fun tuner car or something? Or
yeah. So for the record, like, I didn't get into music properly until I was like 13 or 14, you know?
Okay.
My mom made me take piano lessons when I was young, but I hated them, you know? And I
Okay.
never really considered being a musician. I'm the oldest, so I didn't have anyone really showing me cool music till I was about 14.
Interesting.
Like then I had a friend show me some stuff, and that like changed everything. And that was like, oh, I want to play guitar, I want to play drums, I want to play like, you know, heavier music or rock or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's where that sort of dream, you know, crystallized, if you will. But the love for cars has been there like as far back as memory goes.
Wow.
You know, I remember, I always tell people this, but it's true, and it'll always have an impact on me. But like when I was really young, like because I think I loved cars even before my memories, you know, the memories I can access. So like at some point, my mom got me this like Ferrari F40 model, like those
Wow.
diecast models,
That'll
those
do
118
it.
models. And like I just remember seeing this thing and being like, okay, well, this is gonna be my life, I guess, you know? Like this is now the thing I'm
That'll
obsessed
do it.
with. And I
Yep.
must have been like 4 or 5 years old. And like, you know, I just loved that thing, and I started to like ask for more models and whatever. But like, yeah, I loved cars always. Like always loved cars.
That's sick.
And I
So-
remember like when I was like younger and like, you know, I would just like, I mean, like I'd talk about cars. This is when I was like, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old. Like I used to like look in the windows at like the car's speedos to see like how far they would go. Like, oh, this one goes to like, you know, 140 miles an hour. This one goes to 160. That's crazy. You know, that car has 4 exhaust pipes. That must be a fast one. You know, just like just looking at cars, just obsessed. I've always been obsessed. But yeah, you know, this whole part of the story, I have no money. I have nothing. I have no means. I'm just window shopping. And
Right.
again, if we're
What was
talking
like the
about
first
like,
cars that you wished that you could buy?
oh, I remember seeing like when it came out, like the BMW M3 E46 in Laguna Seca blue, which also
Oh
probably
my
started my
God.
obsession with blue cars.
Yeah.
You know, because I'd never seen that color on a car before, and I was like, "That's
Mhm.
wild," and I was like, "That just did something to me."
You
And
just
the E46 was
unlocked
just such
part of your soul.
yeah. It's like, okay, so this is now what I like. And I always liked the BMWs and the M3s, especially the, you know, the older ones. I always just thought M3s looked so cool. They always had the coolest wheels. They always had speedometers that would go like for like 180. I was like, oh my God, that's so fast. That's crazy.
The fastest
you know?
car I've ever seen.
Right. Because you always just assume that whatever it goes to is like the car's top speed, right?
Especially
Had
as a kid,
4
like that's
exhaust
perfect
pipes.
kid logic. Like, yeah, well, it's got
Right.
4 exhaust pipe. It goes to 180 miles an hour. This is the coolest car I've ever seen. Have you seen
Coolest.
this pastel blue? Come on.
Right. So then like yeah, like that was like one of those cars. I also remember, so kind of a side note, like when I was 8, we moved to Belgium for a few years.
Damn sick.
My dad's job, right? But and that was fun. But I remember like at one point, like we were just driving around and we passed a Ferrari dealership, and like I just about had a heart attack. And like they were closed, but like, you know, I was like kind of like looking on the window. I'd never seen these things up close, and it was just like affecting me. And there was a 348. There was like a red 348 in there, if you remember those.
Yeah,
And you know,
I
those
do.
cars, like even still today, they look kind of striking. And they've got the Testarossa style like strakes on the doors. I think they're
dude.
whatever
Any
they're
like
called.
90s generation Ferrari is like it for me. Like that's the generation.
Well, it's because what we grew up with, and
guess
it
that's
doesn't
true.
look like anything else on the road, you know? Like it was
That's
like the
true.
first time seeing, and they're so low to the ground and whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, having no concept of money. I was like, Dad, can we get a Ferrari? He's like, no, like, no, can't get a Ferrari, you
That's
know?
amazing.
And then like, I swear like a week or 2 later, I saw like a Ferrari parked outside like our apartment that we lived in, like, you know, and we actually lived next to the school, that we were the building next to the school. So like I used to just walk outside, walk to school. So I was always walking. I was like, there's a Ferrari outside. I was like, oh, you bought it. He's like, no, that's not our car. Don't touch it. Like, I was like, no, I know that you bought it because I asked for it the other day. Like,
Holy crap.
I was
He's like, no, stop getting in that
he's
guy's
like,
car.
don't
It's
touch
not
that car.
ours.
That is not our car. And like I was like, you're just keeping it a secret. Like,
Holy crap.
yeah. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like it looks kind of used, and there's someone's gloves and a bunch of stuff inside. That's okay, you know. Like,
That's okay, Dad. It still goes to
I don't
180.
mind.
This one actually goes to 200. Let's go.
Yeah. So that was always like kind of parked out. I must have belonged to someone who lived like close by or whatever. And they parked it like just on the street or whatever. So it was, which is kind of wild
What a
in
flex,
hindsight,
I love it.
right?
So,
but like, yeah.
so then to go back, so like the glove for cars was always there, but the means for it, you were walking to work, you didn't need a car. So that was just like a thing that you liked and you were doing the music thing. Because my other question in that was like, at what moment in your early days was like oh my God, maybe this is working just a little bit? Of like, when did you start to feel it catching or being like, wait, not only do I get to make my music, but like people care?
To answer that, we have to go to space. So sorry. So, from this perspective, we could see the full story. So, it's weird. So we put out our first album, and that got a very sort of lukewarm reception. People seem to like it, but again, we go on tour and people didn't really dig it. And then just something happened between that and the second album. Like by the time we put out our second album, that's when people started to take an interest. That's when all of a sudden, like, people were coming to shows to see us, and like we'd play songs and we'd see people moshing and they'd be singing along to like choruses or whatever.
And how many years is that from you like being able to full send music?
Oh, so like, yeah, I think I dropped out of school in like 2004-ish. Yeah. And 2005. And like, this wasn't, we put our first album out in like 2010. So it was a while. It took a while to get a band together. It took a while to get, and like we had a record deal at this point, but like, we turned down record deals for like 3 years,
But you had years in the game before it started to catch.
Oh yeah. But again, you have to realize like this was just something that I wanted to do, like,
right? Because you had Bulb before Periphery, right?
But that was just what I was uploading stuff as,
Yeah.
And like I'm putting out a solo album, then that will be under Bulb. That became my name by accident.
Got it.
That was the name of my only other real band in Toronto when I lived there. Like I had a band, it was called Bulb.
Okay.
That all fell apart. But since I uploaded everything and I kept uploading stuff, people just thought that I was Bulb. They just kept calling me that.
So you're like,
and it's anytime you have to explain a long story and explain why people are wrong on the internet, like it's a losing battle. So eventually I just became Bulb. It's not a name I would ever I've never self-apply that name, but I just gave up eventually. So I became Bulb, and that became my sort of nickname. And then it became like kind of a good like shorthand, like if we were on the road or whatever, and if someone calls me Misha, then I probably know them or have met them. If they call me Bulb, then it's like we haven't met before,
Oh wow, yeah. Yeah, that
hey,
actually
Bulb,
makes sense.
Be like, oh, what's up,
You're like, hello, new friend. Let us
hello,
meet.
new friend. Yeah. So yeah, it can provide some context, but maybe less so today, but especially back then. But yeah, like that. It all took a while, but like, there was a lot of sort of like internet hype about us, and there were labels that were interested but not interested. A lot of the labels that were interested, I think, had people there that were like, oh, you got to get this band, but the people who made decisions didn't really understand why, or didn't get it, and then like Ash at Sumerian really wanted us, and then this is where Sumerian was like kind of like, who, like what is this label,
Yeah.
And we turned down record deals for like 3 years, if not a little longer, because I knew exactly the kind of deal that I wanted. Everyone was like, you're never going to get this kind of deal. And then eventually we did. And right now in hindsight, I'm so glad that we waited, because as a result, we own all of our music,
Dude.
We own everything.
A weird parallel that I'm kind of like drawing as we're talking is your career as a musician is so ahead, but so similar to what people can do now online with like, you can download a DAW, you can make your own loops and samples and beats, and you can kind of be like this solo artist, be it hip hop or bedroom pop, whatever. People can make music on their laptops, record at home, and just upload it and have a career. And that's such a common thing now. But like, dude, you were essentially doing that back in 2004. And you were probably working on a genre that people didn't understand the same way that some of these genres are now getting understood, which is so
Yeah.
wild.
No, it's definitely a parallel. And people always ask me, they're like, so what's the secret? Do you have any tips? And I'm like, the problem is that like all the things that work for us will not work for you anymore because they're now the standard, And when I was doing these things, I didn't even think about it. Like the reason I was sharing music online was because I posted on forums back when forums were a thing. Now you'll probably have Discord or whatever,
Right.
And the dynamic on Discord's a little different too. But like, forums were big back then. And the reason I was on forums was like, I'm a big Meshuggah fan. I play 7-string guitars. I'm a big Petrucci fan and production fan. So I was on all these forums because, I couldn't talk to my friends about any of this stuff. And it kind of annoyed them if I did. And then all of a sudden there's a group of people where not only like, can we talk about this stuff, but they're happy to talk about it. So I found like my little group of people, and then I happened to upload music. It was like the music was like a secondary thing. Yes. And a lot of people, every now and then there'd be someone who'd like be like, oh, that's a forum like where Misha posts. Let me post some music and be like, who the fuck are you? I could swear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. They'd be like, who the fudge are you? And like they wouldn't listen because it was like, oh, you're just here to shamelessly self-promote, Right. Whereas like I was like a community member first, and like I was kind of sheepishly putting my music up, but then people liked it, so then I was like, oh, okay, well then I might as well just keep uploading. But there was never this like master plan of like, oh, this is the trick is like you go on the forums and you make friends and then you upload your music. It was actually something I didn't even think about. And as I said, I almost didn't do it because I was so nervous that it was going to get ripped apart.
I can really speak to that too, because I was on car forums. I wasn't on music forums, but I was on car forums, and it was just a different community. It's not like Discord or Instagram or Reddit. Like it was like you almost got respect if you could bring and share value with people. Like the more you could come in and say, I figured out this guitar tone, or I figured out how to do this engine swap, the more value, the better, higher quality photos you could upload, or the better tracks that you could share got you the cred, which doesn't really feel like the same space anymore, strangely.
And that's you're sort of hitting the nail on the head there, which is that you're getting involved. So like you have respect from other people for being part of this community, and it's genuine. You're there because you're talking about something that you're passionate about, which most people aren't.
Yeah.
And then it just happened to be a good vehicle to put out music. So that's why I was like sort of prolific. It was like I was just so excited that I could be recording music on my own.
Yeah.
And that I could do it myself, not bother anybody. And I'd be recording till like 4 or 5 in the morning, and just like putting out ideas, and then I just upload them, and I could get like instant feedback, and people seemed to be stoked about it. And I was learning as I'm going. Sometimes I was getting like critical feedback. Sometimes people were hating on it or whatever, and it maybe helped me develop a bit of a thicker skin towards that as well. But like there was sometimes stuff where I always found that like if someone said like criticize something about it, and it kind of hurt, it was because I knew it was true. And it's like, well, maybe I need to work on that. Maybe I need, like, if I just disagreed with them, I'm very stubborn. I'd be like, whatever. But like, if there was like, if it kind of stung, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I do need to work on that. And I would work on that. So it was a little bit of it was a way to sort of learn and improve. But yeah, I think the important thing is that the impetus was pure there. It was really more about like just community. And chatting with friends that you were stoked to be able to chat with and like learn more about this very, very niche hobby.
Totally. And I love the way that you're framing that too, because you're so right. Like if somebody were to come to you and be like, how do we replicate this? Like you can't, because that was such a different time and a different era. But I just think that it's, again, another testament to you just being a genuine fan and loving what you were doing. Because I think the thing you can replicate is whatever your craft is, whatever the year is, you can find, like, you can be passionate about it and find where other people are passionate about the same thing. Like that will always exist somewhere.
Yeah. And like, but that's a lot less clear a path to like, how do I make, you know what I'm saying? It's
totally.
Like, because what I'll tell people is just, follow your passions, like just do the things you're passionate about, and like maybe things will line up. And I was just passionate about it in and of itself. So I wasn't getting anything out of it other than like, oh, I can talk about these things. Just like if you're a car guys, if they get together, will not shut up.
Yeah.
Like you have to pry them apart, because it's like, oh, it's kosher to talk to you about this stuff. And like, people aren't going to hate us, like, and then everyone else is like, yo, well, you guys just shut up about cars. And like
So real.
so it's kind of that thing. Like the goal there is just like, oh, like we can have this conversation. That's awesome. So like that's unfortunately the trick. And I mean I don't know what the trick is today. And unfortunately the scene is ever changing. So
Totally. But it's just
you
cool.
know.
It's like really cool to hear that because you were just doing it for the love of it. And again, there's this weird parallel where you kind of did exactly what artists are now excited to do of like record in their bedroom on their own and be able to put stuff out. You had this vision for what releasing music should be, probably ahead of its time when everyone was signing away a ton of their rights. So it's not like you had this stubborn master plan or anything. It's kind of just like you kept it so simple in the sense of like, does this feel rad? Am I stoked on this? And followed that compass. And then the universe happened to work for you in that sense with a little bit of.
It's kind of still what we do as well.
Yeah. Fuck,
so
that's still cool.
Kind of, yeah, it's fun. And that's the thing is like, actually there was like a point where, and this is like kind of a word of warning. It's like to those of you who are successful chasing your dreams. And it's a lesson I had to learn as well, is that can backfire. That be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. Because all of a sudden, I think anyone who looks at a hobby and says it would be wonderful to make a living out of this should be aware of this caveat, which is that it becomes a job. No matter what you do, there will be moments where your job is still a job.
Yeah.
And some of the magic of a hobby, some of the best parts of a hobby are that you never have to do it, but you have to do your job. And the second that, I don't know, this depends on the personality type, but the second that you have to do your hobby, it can all of a sudden not feel like much of a hobby. It can feel very much like a job and take a lot of the magic and a lot of the passion out of it. And that started to happen with the band because like, all of a sudden now we're making money. Now it's like one of my main sources of income, and we're not making a ton of money, but we're making money. We're now not negative anymore on tours,
Yeah.
And now I can like quit my job. Like I had other jobs, like I was like producing, and I've always had like a bunch of different ways of making money because the goal for me was always to try to make money eventually passively to where I could like be making money while I'm doing this podcast with you, or whatever, just sitting around playing video games. That was the goal, right? Because I was like, working sucks. Working sucks. Working is hard. And it's like, if I could find a way to make money without having to work so hard and grind constantly, like not only would that be great, but it's much more sustainable. It's like, I'm young, I have energy, I can grind now, but eventually I won't. So I wanted to like look towards the future. But yeah, like this started to become a grind, and I was like getting very upset about that and kind of depressed because it was like, well, I've achieved my dream. This is my dream job. I've achieved the impossible for me, and yet I'm not getting much happiness. I'll say it never affected our music or the creative. Like that's always been very sacred, and we contractually and had everything in place to make sure that no one could ever fuck with that. Like
that's great.
The label never heard our album until we were turning it in for it to be printed. So like that was the first time they would hear it. Same with management. Like it was like no one was involved with the album process except for us.
Sick.
And that was always sacred. But the everything else and the touring and like the approach and like what sort of looks we're going for with touring and why we're accepting this and this festival or whatever, that's where we were making compromises. And we weren't feeling good. And I felt like we were going out on the road a lot just to lose money. Our manager at the time, I don't think was a very good manager. Mm-hmm. And he didn't mind sending us out to lose money because he's one of those managers who would still collect even if we lost money, which a lot of good managers do not do that, but he did. And had no qualms about it either. It was an argument. And, there was just a lot of philosophical differences there. And, I was just starting to get very upset with what this was representing, like I just wasn't feeling fulfilled. And I always loved, my favorite part was always writing the music.
Yeah.
And the live shows were starting to not cover for like the sadness and like for like this thing. So what I realized is that, to cut a long story short, is that what I always loved about music was it being a passion project. Like it was never about the money. The money was always like a means to an end. It's like, if we have money, then we can go on tour. We can afford to go on tour and we can afford to, tour at this level and have production and have all these things. But the goal was never really to like make money off of it, which is why we were never really like concerned with the radio route or like playing arenas or stadium, which a lot of people, including our old manager and like people on our team, were trying to influence us to do because it would be very good for them. But for us, we were like, we don't care about that stuff. Like, I would rather play to like an intimate small crowd that's excited than to play like a huge arena. I was like, I have nothing against arenas and stadiums. Like, if we get to that level organically, then wonderful. But like, I don't think that will sort of make me happy in any way if it's not this sort of genuine connection, and if it wasn't done with music that I believe in.
So what happened? How did you fix it? Because you're obviously still here.
Fired a lot of people.
Wow.
And took control of a lot of stuff. Started our own label. Got a manager who is incredible. The only way I could like sort of relate that is like if you ever dated a girl or significant other that was just terrible to you. I feel like everyone has that one bad one, you know?
Yeah.
I generally get along with my exes, but like there's one that like I don't talk to. I don't think she's a bad person or anything. We just were very, very bad fit for each other. And
you can
I have
look
not
back at it and be like, whew, that wasn't right.
And then I remember the girl I dated right after. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that it could be this good. Like, why was I putting up with that? Well, this manager's kind of the same thing. It's like, God, we've been with him now for like 5 or 6 years. And like, I consider him like a member of this. Like at this point, he's so enmeshed in the band. Like I couldn't even imagine Periphery without him.
That's amazing.
And like, unlike with the previous manager, I want to make sure this guy gets paid this guy's worth every penny. I mean, since he's become our manager, Periphery has just made more and more money every year. So like and that's the sign of a good manager. It's like whatever you're paying him, you should be still netting more. So this guy's the real deal. Yeah, literally our band would not be where it is without his help. And he understood what we wanted to do, and effectively we've been able to turn, for me, because I had all these other side ventures and signature models and businesses. Now the money that Periphery's never made very much money. But now that doesn't matter.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you about that, because at what point in your head, like it seems like you did a lot of what you do in your life out of a point of just passion. However, you did acknowledge that early on, you're like, I should figure out a way to have some kind of passive income. So like, where did your business savvy skills come from? Where did that idea and where did, just going from being like, all right, I should have passive income, to thinking of ways like selling tones or selling digital assets, like where did that really start clicking for you and how did you master that? Because I think you've done a great job of it.
I don't think I've mastered anything. I think this is just one of those things where it's just the way my brain is wired, like I wouldn't even consider myself like kind of like strong with business. I never would have considered myself with that, but it was just sort of putting things together.
Interesting.
And I mean, even still, like, there's so many. I just consider myself to be very mediocre at a lot of things.
That's so wild.
But I surround myself with people that like sort of complete teams and that like you could delegate.
Yeah.
I'd say that that's kind of an important thing. It's not about all being great at something. It's like if you can just delegate and have everyone kind of divide and conquer, that makes it very efficient.
That's incredible.
The people that I work with are people. They're people that I trust. Like everyone that I work with, I like. And that's very important. And I would put that over money. There are deals I could do, and there are companies I could work with, and there are moves I could make right now. I could make a few phone calls and make more money.
Right.
But I like the people I work with, and I think that's the most important thing. Like having a genuine relationship with the people that you work with is worth whatever amount of opportunity costs as far as money.
Well, it's like you kind of just explained that lesson that you guys learned is like you did the thing, be careful what you wish for, it becomes the job. You experienced Periphery as a job. You experienced it not being rad, and then kind of had this second breath of life of like it getting better. So I can only imagine you feeling that within your personal business where you're like, nah, fool me once.
Yeah. But you start to understand that like just having a good group of people around you that you trust and that have the same vision shortcuts a lot of conversations.
Wow.
There's a lot of conversations that don't need to happen.
Wow.
Like in any of the businesses or any of these things, it would be very easy for a lot of these people to screw the business over, screw me over, or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's just not a conversation because and nor is it stress. And if you have those things, that's a bit of a red flag.
Totally.
That's maybe a bit of a tip right there because that is now stress that lives in your head and it's inefficient. That space could be used towards working on something, but now you're worrying about something and now you're butting heads over something. So I'd say finding the team and finding a group of people that you genuinely get along with, like I have my signature guitar with Jackson Guitars. And I say this like openly. It's like there are a bunch of guitar companies. Like my guitar that we've designed is my favorite guitar. But there's a lot of guitar companies I could have designed a guitar with, and they probably would have done a great job as well,
Totally.
But it's the people at Jackson that I really like.
Wow.
And it shortcuts a lot. I work with guitar nerds there, so they get it. We don't have to have as in-depth conversations. If they're sending me a sample to approve and they think it's sick, I'm probably going to think it's sick. And if it's not, they don't send it to me. They're like, no, it's not. It's not quite there because we're looking at that same sort of granular level of stuff, which if we weren't on the same page and some people are more financially motivated, they might be like, oh, it's fine, dude, you should just push this through because here's why. We can make we can make NAMM for this and then we can have it out by Q2. And it's like all these reasons, which I won't care about because I'm like, I just want the guitar to be sick. And we can figure out the money later,
What was your first side hustle endeavor? Or like what was your first thing outside of the band that made you money?
I mean, on tour giving lessons, even though I wasn't a good guitarist, I would give lessons. And that was like kind of motivated by our drummer. He's probably even more business minded. He's probably the most business minded. He's a hustler through and through.
Sick. Again, aligning with people that you're like.
Yeah. And I mean, like he's just to the nth degree there. And he was giving lessons and he was encouraging us to give lessons. I'm like, sure, like however I can make a buck.
Right.
And then also, I'd kind of accidentally started to produce bands, at home. And like, although I'd never really wanted to produce bands, I was like, well, this beats like, it was like, oh, if I produce a band, I don't have to work for a month. So I'll just do that. It seems like much less work.
Again, you knew what regular work was and you knew how much that paid you. And then you knew how much a band would pay you. And you're like, well, this is better.
And then I would just keep my expenses very low. Like, I don't drink. I wouldn't go out. I didn't have a girlfriend for most of this, kind of on purpose. It was just like all these things are like distractions and expensive. And it's like, I have my goal. Like I want to put everything towards that.
Yeah.
I was really careful with how I bought gear. Because if you can get, I was always looking at resale. So a lot of the stuff I was buying, I was selling for at least what I paid, if not more, making some money off the stuff. It was just everywhere I could, I was trying to spend as little money as possible and sort of see where I could make some money.
Could you like flip gear on forums? Like I know like car.
Oh
parts,
yeah,
nice.
Yeah. And with social media in general would make that like kind of easy to do. But I'd always find ways to get gear at like, I was kind of aware of the market and I'd just be like, okay, that's a good price. And like, if I wanted to get rid of it, I bet I could make money off of it, It's
funny how that like economy is in every hobby or subculture, right? Like in cars, like I can tell you like what specific wheels sell for as if they are currency or like, like there's like just, I'm sure it's that with music.
Yeah. I think exactly the same way about cars when I'm buying cars.
Yeah.
And the thing is once you have a bit more money and leverage and like once you, like especially with money being as cheap as it is right now.
Yeah.
You can own these, like not to get too in depth in this, but like I've invested against like I have the Lamborghini, right? But like I've invested against that car to where if I sold it today, I would probably be positive. So
totally. Yeah.
So if we ran a net calculation on it, at the very like worst case scenario, it's cost me $0 to own that car for 2 years.
Dude, that blew my mind when I understood that. I did the same thing with my Porsche where I was just like, yo, wait a minute. I can get money at this interest rate and it's selling for this. And I can sit here and watch the depreciation curve and I can watch what they're selling for with comparable miles. So it's like, you mean to tell me that I can get money essentially for free and then apply this? Like, that's funny that you said that actually, because I think that maybe you've applied that to quite a lot of things.
Well, so here's the thing. unlike gear, the good thing about like guitars and gear and whatever
Yeah.
is there's usually just one sort of depreciation hit, like when you buy it, so new to used. Then
Sure.
from there, as long as nothing drastic happens to it, they tend to hold value. And in some
Sure.
cases,
Yeah.
will depending on hype will increase. But
There's
you
not
just get that
miles
kind
on a
of one.
guitar.
No, and you just kind of get that one dip. Now, obviously, if you trash it or whatever, that may affect it. But even then, it's not like a depreciation curve. It's just kind of like a dip, and then it's just sort of like just stays that value unless you do something stupid, right?
Right.
But like that makes it very easy to sort of calculate this kind of stuff. So, and I had no problem buying used gear. So I just buy used gear and I'd try to negotiate a good price on it. And I'm like, well, I could sell it for more than that. And yeah, you can flip gear around. I wouldn't say like I made a ton of money flipping gear. I know people who made way more and way more strategic. I wanted to use the gear and whatever, but it was more like, well, I'm supporting my hobby and I'm doing it in a way where like, if we look at the net cost, it's not really that much. And if ever I was in trouble
Yeah.
financially, I could sell this to where I wouldn't have lost money, or maybe I made like a couple bucks at the end of the day. So that
Totally.
that was in the back of my head when I was buying,
Yeah.
because as I started to make a bit more money, like I get more and more gear, and
Mhm.
and it looked kind of crazy at times, but it's like, no, this is like strategic, like, and
Yes.
really like I don't
Yeah.
actually have that much money in this because
Well,
it
it's
resells so well.
and I even
With
see now
cars,
like you're interested like you're into watches, and I think that's literally just another place to put money and hold it. Like it's
well,
not
it
like
says
you're
I
just like
traded a guitar for my Daytona, and it's since gained, I think, $15,000 of value. So it's
exactly.
like that thing's an investment, and I didn't put very
Exactly.
much money into the guitar that I traded it for. So that
Right.
I'm like honestly, I've joked about it, but I could probably like smash that watch against the ground, take a piss on it, and still make a profit at this point.
Yeah,
So
holy
I wear
crap.
that watch all the time. This is a watch. I'm a watch ambassador for Crown and Caliber. So this is the one I'm loaning from them right now. But I actually want to buy this. This is the GMT. I don't know if you could. Let me
Oh,
not be a
cool.
clown about this. But I actually messed up on this one. I've been wanting this one for a while, and I thought the prices would dip,
Yeah.
and now they're about $5,000 more. So if I'd bought this when I kind of wanted to buy it, I would be up.
Yeah. Well, and like everything you're saying there is like you're understanding an economy of goods past just the dollar, because that
Yeah.
exists in all of these different hobbies or interests or genres of items.
Well, all these things are frivolous, right? And they're
Sure.
irresponsible. My love for cars is irresponsible. The cars that I like are stupid.
Yeah, they are.
Like if I could switch something off in my brain to not like them, I probably would, because it's so stupid and irresponsible, and you're throwing a lot of money at a depreciating asset. So I said, if I'm going to be irresponsible, I'm going to be responsibly irresponsible, right? I'm going to try and
Wow.
mitigate the damage as much as possible. So I understand that these things are terrible investments, but maybe there's a way to structure this where I can make it not as bad. Like, and yes, hobbies cost money. Like that's why they're hobbies and not a job. Jobs you get paid, hobbies you pay for. So this is a hobby. And it's also something that I learned a lesson from music with. Music, I was able to come out the other side, turn it back into a hobby, and now I love it again, right?
Holy shit.
But you know, the entrepreneurial part of my brain's like, oh, I love cars. I should get like a car YouTube going. I should do all this stuff,
Yeah.
and like try to figure out like how to pay as little for cars as possible. But the thing that I realized is there's always a cost. And when I was younger, I didn't mind trading time and stress to save money.
Yeah.
But now that I have a bit of money to play with, I'm better off using that and saving myself the time and stress. So I'm actively going to keep cars as a hobby.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pursue it, because if it becomes a full-time job, one, I don't have the time. And two, I don't ever want to have the stress, or I don't ever want to look at a car and be like, oh, I don't want to drive that. Like I have to drive that. Like that to me would be very depressing for something I consider to be my most passionate hobby. And the cost of that is money.
Wow. I relate to that on a spiritual level. Like
Yeah.
I knew I loved cars for a very long time, but I had a very similar thought process where I was like, I always want to love this and I never want to mess it up. So if I can find something that I really like or something else that I like and make that my career, then I can always make this the hobby. So I can't
Yeah.
believe you're saying
And
that
this is
so
this is
well.
the caveat. This is the one. I've come out from the other side, and it's a lesson that I've learned. It's a very big lesson, which is be careful with these things, especially if you're entrepreneurial. Your gut instinct is like, okay, how do I turn this into something
Yeah.
profitable? But that cost is time and stress. And eventually, and especially as you start to get older, time and stress aren't something that you can just throw around as much anymore, you know? And those are very valuable things. So I would rather just spend the money. But if I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to spend it as responsibly as possible in the pursuit of something very irresponsible.
To conclude this, because I know that we've been rambling a little bit and we've gone in our little side ventures and all that.
This is the danger when you have people who have similar interests. You will ramble about stuff and lose people.
It's so bad, but it's my favorite thing. I acknowledge that it's bad, and I'm like, I don't care. That's fine.
No, it's good.
Here
it's
we
good.
go.
It's good people.
So, though, to conclude a podcast episode and to make it somewhat manageable and not a giant long episode, I think the thing that I was really the most interested with you is that there's this theme of a genuine dude who showed up and did something that he loved, had success at it, and stayed genuine and stayed doing those things. And the success and the side hustles and the side money and all of those things were kind of the afterthought, but you did them very well. So the piece that I want to conclude with is like, what would you share for those people that are next up, right? There's going to be different genres. There's going to be different structures in business, but I think the example that you said is so remarkable that I'm just curious of your perspective as you now look at it as a whole.
Yeah, I'd say my advice will sound cliche, but I'll warn you guys. There's a lot of lessons that I've learned in life, and then like after you learn it the hard way, you realize it's best summed up with some cliche sentence that you're like, I finally understand this. That's the perfect way to say it. I just never had the context or perspective to understand why that's the perfect thing. But this is gonna sound super cliche, but it's also the most effective way to get the point across, which is just be genuine and chase genuine things, chase passions, chase things that you want. Do not chase the money. And like the money will follow, it won't follow on its own. Be strategic, be smart. Try to educate yourself. Try to just always have the perspective like how can I profit from this with, from a financial sense. But that should always be secondary. If I had a choice between something I could make considerably more money with, but I wouldn't enjoy, or something that I'm making considerably less, but I would really love, that is what I would choose every time. And I would just trust that the money would come. This is my coffee company, right? Golden Lantern Coffee Roasters. I don't think we make.
Of course, you're into coffee too.
Yeah,
Come on,
no,
dude.
I'm like the biggest coffee
on.
nerd. Biggest coffee nerd. It's the only reason why I have a coffee company. So I partnered with like our old tour manager, who's a genius at roasting. We don't make any money. Doesn't matter. I put so much time and work into this because I love it. I'm actually technically a silent partner. Like I don't need to like put any work into it, like as per our contract, and I do just because I love it. And honestly, the way I see it, like I'm getting free coffee. And like it's the best. It's like the absolute best coffee, and that's worth the investment alone. But like I'm also getting to like work on a craft that I really, really care about. So
that comes back to
that's my latest sort of investment. I don't ever care if we make a buck off of this. Like I'm so stoked with and it's one of my best friends. I love him to death, Yeah. He's a guy I trust to the end of the world. He's one of the hardest working people I know, Matt Rosenblum.
It really sounds like that's the theme in your life. You
chase the passions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I don't know why, but I've been pretty fortunate that like when I really set my sights on something, it's like I can just trust myself to make it happen, It doesn't always happen. I've failed at like a billion things, but
sure.
like, but the things that have been successful have always been the result of like just feeling like, this is probably where people are like, oh, you want it. Like everybody wants it. But it's just really like pursuing it for the right reasons. Because here's the thing. And this always used to be my argument with music, because people are like, why don't you just sneak a couple radio songs onto your album, and then those can be like the drivers for radio. And then you still have all the stuff, And it's like, I have no interest in that because that's not why I make music. I don't even know how I would create a radio song. We've had songs that have been on radio. We have songs that have had some commercial appeal, but that was never the goal. That's just how it happened to be. And that's a beautiful thing, in my opinion, you know? But to sit there with a goal of trying to create that is all of a sudden makes it not fun, you know?
Yeah.
And there are people that fall into that trap because they're at this point, this turning point where if they did that, you know, there are potentially great financial advantages, you know? All of a sudden your bank can make money, you wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. But it can also alienate your fans. It's such a risk, and it's just, if I did that, it just wouldn't be genuine, and I wouldn't be passionate about it. I wouldn't be able to sell it. And if it sucked or if it got criticism, like I said earlier, I would agree with them, and it would really hurt. If I do it now,
it would ring true. You'd feel it.
Yeah. I'd be like, fuck, you're right, dude. That sucks. I can at least say that what we've done with Periphery, like and all my side projects and solo project, whatever I put out, if people hate it, like, it's fine. Because I believe in it. I'm a stubborn asshole. Like, I'll be like, yeah, that's cool. Like, I know what I like about it. I know that I feel good about it, so it doesn't matter. But if I compromised on that and then got called out for it, that would hurt. That would sting real hard. And I just don't ever want to be in that situation. So maybe I'm just a stubborn, egotistical asshole. But like, that's, you know, I just don't want it to hurt when people insult me. You know?
I've really learned a lot from you in this podcast, to be honest. Like, you kept it so simple, and like what I feel in it and what I've been reminded of is just like, you can kind of keep it that simple. Like, if you're truly, truly passionate about something, that fire will drive you to making the right steps. And then it's the basics of like not aligning with shitty people, not doing things for the wrong reasons, not chasing these wrong, like, you know, the money or the false goals or milestones. And you're an example of that paying off. And again, it doesn't happen with everyone, but it's really fucking cool to have somebody as genuine and keeping it that simple as you show that it's possible. That's why
I said so much of this comes down to luck, because like these guidelines don't guarantee anything. Yeah. But it is, you know, it's shocking how simple it is. But I think people want it to be more complicated. Even when I think about like the people I associate with, if I were to describe what I'm looking for, people who give a shit and who work hard. That's it. That's literally it. Like, but it's like, oh, that shouldn't be like, it's fucking impossible to find people like who genuinely like good people. They give a shit and they work hard. Like, that is really, really hard to find. So, you know, it's deceptively simple, and it yet is complicated, but like at least the basic tenets of what I do and you know, how I approach everything are simple enough to explain casually over a podcast. And the difficulty,
you had to go to space to do it, dude. It's not.
I did have to go to space. Thanks, Elon. But yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it's all in the minutia, and it's in the opportunity. Like, it's not quite as simple as it sounds, but at least you can always call on these very simple sort of ideas to remember, and simple things like, don't chase the money, like chase the passion. Like, that's really what I would put forward, because those times where we were playing to people who didn't give a shit about us and we were sleeping on people's floors, I was still stoked. If I cared about money, I would have been so bummed, but I was chasing the passion. And that's why all of that was okay. And in whatever venture you have, whatever business you have, you are going to have hard times. You are going to have times that under certain circumstances, you'd be like, is this even fucking worth it? But if you're doing something that you believe in, something that you really are just like, you'll be like, I don't care. Like, this is great. Doesn't matter. I haven't made a buck with this. Like, I love it. Makes me very happy.
Cool.
So that would be my lesson. Like, cause then even if you don't get the money, at least you get some happiness out of it.
Dude, that you could not have concluded that any better. And I like, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for not being above it. You didn't know me at all. This was just some random podcast, and you've done a ton of these, and you took the time. And I really hope that anyone listening to this understands that and appreciates your time and appreciates you sharing that lesson, because I certainly fucking do.
All right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's no problem at all. I'm sorry that I have to end this now, but I have to take a call in Alpha Centauri, and that's like 4 light years away. So,
dude,
better
get
skedaddle.
on the time travel in there.
Yeah.
Cool. There it is, Misha's story. Holy crap. I hope you guys got as much out of that as I did. I'm truly blown away by that. One thing that I will say here at the end is we really got deep into nerding out on cars and a bit of finance. So I'm going to cut that and make it its own bonus episode. So if you subscribe to the Patreon, that'll be there. If you made it this far and you liked the episode, again, if you're down to share it with your friends, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel or the podcast, wherever you're listening. All those things help me so immensely, and I really do appreciate it. And it's something that you can do for free. There it is. Enjoy. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for listening.